All right, what's up, everyone? You are watching a recorded episode of the SIRS this week. We are super excited to have John Meadows on. John, so thankful for you to be joining with us this week for the SIRS. We've podcasted in person before, but I'm super excited to bring in Jacob and Justin. This is the Supplement Industry Roundtable, where we talk about all things related to supplement industry. John, if we get a little bit of a background on you, I know there are so many different things to talk about you with, like between athletic training, bodybuilding, supplements. You have done so many things, so I'm excited to see where we go with this. Can we start off with a little bit of a background on like how you got into this and how you got into the wild world of bodybuilding and then supplements?
Well, the bodybuilding part's pretty easy. I've done that my whole life. I competed when I was 13 years old, so I got off to a really early start, and I never gave up. I just love it. I continue to train hard, and so I've just done it my whole life. The supplement story is a little different. I've always loved supplements, and you guys may or may not remember the old bags of Mega Mass 2000 protein powder that Weider had. And I remember when I was a little kid, I had a really hard time gaining weight. So I remember I would save up money. I'd buy the big bag of protein. Then I would mix it up in my giant blender with ice cream and everything else. But I've always actually liked supplements a lot. And I've probably wasted a lot of money on supplements for things that didn't work. But also feel like they can be a great tool. They can be used to your advantage. So I've always loved them. And I've been a part of a few companies, and at a certain point, I just decided to make a go of it myself with my own company. I had some kind of bad experiences with some other shady characters, so I just decided to kind of go it on my own way. And here we are, 3.5 years later, and still training hard, still love supplements, and that's kind of the really 10,000 foot view of it.
So that seems to be like the natural progression of things for a lot of people is a company will sort of bring you on because you're like a face for them, you help them sell their products, and then people at some point that really love supplements are like, you know what, I feel like I should probably do this on my own. I have a little more control over everything and just kind of make it your own, put your own kind of stamp on it. That's kind of like how the progression went for you.
Yeah, and you know what? And I really like the scientific side. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm as smart as you guys are on all the ingredients, but I do put a lot of time into it. I do really enjoy it. So when you're sitting around and talking about different ingredients, I really enjoy it. I was on a call last week, and I was talking about the way we formulated our protein, for example, and the people are like, "Wow, I didn't think you were like that involved." Like, no, I really enjoy this. Like, I put a lot of work into it. That, the new pre-workout we just put out, like, that didn't happen by accident. Like, I really enjoy it. I'm really involved in all aspects of the business, really. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a labor of love, and I enjoy it. I get messages every day from people that say they love this or that. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I'm making a positive contribution. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I think, well, sorry, Ben, I was going to, just an observation I had made is a lot of times, which I think we see in this industry is you have someone that has a following, people follow along with workout plans or your workout videos, and then they're like, oh, well, I can sell them some supplements too. And we take a look at the products and you're just like, it's a way to make some more money. It's easy money for a lot of people. But then when you look at your supplements, you can tell it's a passion of yours. You want to put equal effort into, I'm going to help someone train, but I'm also going to help you, with supplements too. So I know that that's like one thing, because you could just very easily say, hey, hey, I'm John Meadows. I'm a coach, like, here, take this pre-workout. And somebody would probably buy it because they just trust you. But, you're obviously, we'll talk more about your formulas coming up, especially with protein, that freaking lovely protein. But, you're really giving people like ingredients that's really going to help them perform, to a next level, rather than just saying, oh, I can sell you something else, which is what we see a lot of, it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it comes down to, I have a large following that I believe is based on the relationship I've developed with them. So over the years, I've tried to be really good to people. I've tried to treat them right. I also have a high expectation for what I deliver to them. Like if you look at my training programs, they're the most detailed programs in the industry. I mean, they just are. There's a reason why they're a little more expensive. And that's what I'm all about. It's about quality. And I mean, I get like almost sick to my stomach when I hear people say that, because it's easy to talk a good game, but what do your actions say, right? And I hope that my actions would demonstrate that I do care a lot about quality, a lot about good products. And so that's how I try to live, man. I just try to give people what I want and treat them with the utmost respect. So you have that base of business that, that's kind of always there. So you're not always turning over new people all the time. It's like, I got this really good base that likes what I do. They trust me. So that's how I try to build all my businesses.
You've also had a series of setbacks as well, between the company you were with before, but also when I talked with you at the Natural Body event last year, and we asked you a really simple question, like, what have you learned in the last year? You went really in depth about firing people from your company. That was a really funny video, because we expected you to be like, persevere, like, like something philosophical. And you talked about like firing half of your company. And, your company has gone through a few different iterations. I remember it being very public that you had changes in your wholesale pricing at one point. Like there was all different steps of you learning, and it's been kind of cool to see that transparently, because not a lot of people would be as honest about that as you were.
Well, I don't lie. If somebody asks me a question, I answer it. And the truth is that we have struggled a lot. And the truth is it was all my fault. I put the wrong people in place, and I used poor judgment. The products were always good. There was never an issue with the products, but a business is not just products. It's about people. Right. And I made some bad decisions. I hopefully have learned and gotten a lot better in that respect. And now the business is doing fantastic. It's doing great. But to sit here and tell you it's always been roses would be an outright non-truth. So, the last year has been fantastic. Actually, the month of July, just last month, we were 30% higher in our revenue than in any month in the company's history ever. A 30% increase.
That's amazing.
During these times too, where most companies that we talk to at best are treading water, maybe unless, you see a lot of people sales and trying to just cash flow, keeping that going, desperate efforts. So I think that what I've noticed from the trends in the industry with sales and stuff, it's the companies that have really built the groundwork. I don't want to use too many puns about granite and like the rock solid sort of foundations. I don't want to say too many of those things, but the companies that were in it for long-term sustainability are the ones that have been able to navigate this the best. And if anything, a lot of people are now gravitating towards you as sort of like a stable force during some kind of crazy times where you're seeing all these supplement companies take a lot of desperate measures and stuff. So I think it's good to see that people that, went for it, I don't want to say the right reasons, but, you were in it for the long term are the ones that are actually coming out of this, ahead, so it's good to hear.
Yeah, I don't recall us running any sales in the last like 3 or 4 months. We don't have to have that end of the month, got to pay our bills. We're going to give stuff away. So, I've got some people with me now, some co-owners that are just fantastic businessmen, fantastic. And not only that, they care about the products as well. So, it's one thing to get a business guy who's really sharp and he knows how to calculate run rates and margins and how to prepare companies to sell and all that. That's great. But when that person also has a good moral compass, also cares about the ingredients, the products, and that's how my co-owners are. They're very, very good people. I wish I would have had them from the start, but right, hindsight.
Right.
But so we're very fortunate. We got a good team that we all have different strengths, and we bring different things to the table. But the one commonality we all have is we all want to have the best products, and we all care a lot about people. It's not just, it's what can we do? What kind of value can we bring? And I'll give you a good example. When we switched to the bags, which by the way, I was really nervous about.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
I want to hear about that.
I was super nervous. The reason why I was nervous is because when I buy bags, I tear them open, the zippers break, the tear's uneven. And I'm like, man, this is like, what am I going to do now? Like, I can't even seal it. So we got like the ultra high grade zip locks and the straight tears. Like, we paid the highest price we could so that didn't happen to people. Even doing that, we saved, depending on the item, anywhere from $1 to $1.50 a unit, which, as you guys know, that's a good change. That's a good savings.
Right.
So, you know, we had our meetings like, okay, this is great. It's eco-friendly, the bags, they look beautiful. So what do we do now? And we all said the same thing. Let's if we can make the product better, let's try to make it better. So we took some of our formulas and we just reinvested right back into the formula. You know, like the premium, which is now GX, you know, you guys saw we added nitrates to it. We added some alpha GPC. Like, we made a really a standout product even better. And we very easily could have said, okay, now we're making an extra $1.50. We're going to pad our margins. But that just gives you an idea of the kind of people I do business with. Really, really good people.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
You actually, it's funny, you came from a background of having products that really changed my view on stuff. I remember you being with Biotest early on, or at least endorsing their products. Their plasma changed the game on intra-workout nutrition for me. And I still look for hydrolyzed casein around, and no one else is doing it. So I think
expensive.
Expensive.
But I remember, I don't know if you said it or someone said it about you early on when I was learning about nutrition, but you always seem to be a little bit ahead of what science is saying, and you just, because you have experience, you figure things out. And that's been kind of interesting to see in supplements, because you were talking about intra-workout before, you know, Lobliner was doing his thing. And it's been kind of cool to see everything kind of catch up. Your full scoop pre-workout years ago was pretty ahead of times, and now everyone's got a 28-gram scoop. So I'm interested to see what happens next with Granite, because it seems like you're on a pretty good roll.
Yeah, well, I want to give credit to Biotest. Those guys brought me on, and I was their guinea pig / but they took my thoughts and they put a lot of it in action. But those guys, it was really fun. Because, you know, the owner, Tim, so we would sit down and we would say, how can we make a product that you just, like, you literally can't get sore, like you recover so well? And we like the idea of hydrolyzed casein just because of the quick uptake, maybe even quicker than like just basic aminos, actually. You know, not, you know, I know a lot of people watch this and think casein, but not just regular casein, it's hydrolyzed casein.
Right.
And then the cluster dextrin, which was not hardly used at all in bodybuilding. In fact, I can't think of anybody that was using it. You know, we did some research on it. You can read all about it at glico.com, the people who originally came up with it. And there was a teeny tiny bit of evidence, but it was on rats, and there was like one study on endurance racing. So really, what little bit of evidence was out there was really based on endurance. And but I like the fact that it didn't cause your blood sugar to spike. I like the fact that you can get a nice steady level of insulin. I was never really big into the spike your blood sugar while you train hype train. I was never really into that, because number one, you could have the reactive hypoglycemia where your pancreas dumps a bunch of insulin. But then the other thing was that stuff tend to upset people's stomachs. So they're using tons of cheap carb powders, and they're all getting diarrhea, they're getting bloating. And I found out very quickly that cluster dextrin didn't do that. So anyways, so we played around with the formulas. We found something where people literally weren't getting sore. And I was like, this is amazing. Everything I wrote was true. And I made phenomenal progress. I still to this day say 2012 was the year I made a ton of progress. When I turned 40 years old, I added 10 pounds of muscle to my stage weight at 40 years old. And I give those guys a lot of credit. And, you know, and I also studied my friend Milos Sarchev. I studied his thoughts on it. Milos is an incredibly sharp guy. And Milos was talking about, you know, GLUT4 translocation and all the stuff you can do to shove nutrients in the muscle cell. And I thought, you know what, that makes sense. Like, there is a window of opportunity there. People like to laugh at the window of opportunity, but just the mechanical stress of training causes that GLUT translocation. Like, there's a lot of good things happen when you train hard. And so I've really tried to maximize that part of people's nutrition and training. And then along came some cool studies from Australia where they were looking at 3-methylhistidine. It's a marker of protein breakdown. And these guys that were using EAAs, and they were just using basic carbs. They weren't even using cluster dextrin. But you could see their 3-methylhistidine was greatly reduced, almost non-existent in the people who used EAAs and carbs. You could see their cortisol levels were drastically different. So there's clearly something happening there. And people always talk about muscle protein synthesis. Well, you train, it's elevated for 24, 40 hours. But that's only half of the equation, right? The other half is muscle protein breakdown. And that's where I think there's a gap. And that's the part that I've personally tried to focus on. What can you do to, you don't want to, you're going to have muscle damage. Like, you just can't avoid it when you train hard. And I think if you know my training, I advocate training really hard. But if you advocate training hard, then you better be able to back it up with really good recovery. So that's why I've been so obsessed with this train hard, which I feel like is against the times now. I feel like people search for reasons to not train hard now, but then marry that with a really good recovery formula with your food, with your nutrition, with your supplements, put that together. And I think now you got a combination where you can really reach your potential.
Yeah, I don't know, man. There was about 20 different points I want to touch on that that was on. But I think, like what you're saying, there's so many people that get into supplements and their focus is what happens pre-workout, where what you eventually realize after you train and use supplements enough is what you're doing intra, post, maybe through the evening or whatever is really where a lot of the magic happens. It's like, yeah, a lot of things can give you some energy and hype you up to sort of, maybe do some extra work, but then what if you're not recovering properly? But yeah, you touched on a bunch of good talking points in there about how also what is really cool, because supplements, the people that are using them, sometimes it's hard for you to articulate because we're taking maybe some obscure stuff. We're not going to get a whole lot of, data and a lot of studies. So it's like, okay, a lot of people are like, cool, let's go put this into practice. And if you have a consistent training program, if you're really in tune with your training and you have other people around you that are, you can figure this stuff out, whether it's really working or not. You're like, hey, let's just go take it to the gym and we'll tell you in 2 days, basically like how this kind of worked out. So it was like kind of like this perfect storm of you have a good control group to test this stuff on while you're combining this maybe early stage science. And then, that's why I think like what Ben alluded to earlier is staying ahead of the curve, because you're able to extrapolate these, maybe smaller points and you're like, try them. You're like, shit, that worked. So let's run with this kind of thing. So maybe that's why you're ahead of it. That was just really cool. It was a good point, because I think that's what gets lost in the shuffle with using supplements and training sometimes.
Well, I'm always the first to speak on paralysis by analysis. Like, that's always my biggest thing that I go to when it comes to supplements and people, overthinking the specifics of what they're taking and kind of clouding that with how they're training. And a lot of people tend to overlook their entire training methodology because of, oh, well, it's okay, I'm taking this pre-workout and I'm taking this recovery formula and I'm optimizing this, but they're not even focusing on the, the main principles. That's always what I back up to. I know I've said that a lot, but that's another kind of key factor there that kind of gets lost.
Well, when I tell people like the intro workout philosophy I have, it's geared toward a certain group of people. Mm-hmm. It's geared toward people who are training really hard and trying to push the limits. And You'll never hear me say intro workout nutrition's for everyone. Everybody should do it. You'll never hear me say that, because some people don't train hard enough to even demand any extra recovery.
Right.
Ben says that a lot.
That's like
we say it all the time.
I was saying on this podcast, we talk about like these, even intermediate lifters who think they train really hard, that they have to take all these essential amino acids and all those carbs. I'm like, you don't even train that hard. Like, you think you train hard, you don't, and that's actually one of the really interesting things about, I love John's training so much. I actually train straight up West Side Conjugate, but so much of it is very similar to the way that John trades. I go in, I have some sort of pre-exhaust where I get blood into the muscle. I have a few top sets of really heavy compound movements, and then I just engorge the muscle with blood afterwards. And it, for some reason, is super complicated to some people. And I've always thought it was a really simple concept.
Yeah. I've always been an HIT kind of guy, like Dorian Yates, just go and smash it hard and then follow it up with a bunch of volume. But I think the concept's the same. I mean, honestly, like the principle still remains as long as you're progressing volume over time in some way, shape, or form and recovering from that volume stimulus. Like, I mean, that's That's the main principle there.
I think John was the person that started an analogy about like digging a hole and filling it back in.
Yeah.
And I read that and I was like, this makes so much sense. Like I can go in the gym and absolutely kill myself, but if I'm not eating enough the next day, that lingers even further until the next session.
Yeah.
These
The ditch digging analogy, you can dig that ditch real deep, but just to get back up to normal, you know, if you've dug the ditch 5 feet deep, then you better put 5 feet of dirt back in, and that just gets you back to where you were.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is the whole thing around muscle protein breakdown. If you can manage and you only dig that ditch 1 foot deep, now you're in a much better position to actually get back to that and then plus some for a little extra muscle.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like talking about coaching and training and things like that, sort of a maybe couple part question, but getting back to like how you sort of got into, because I feel like everybody that works out these days, right, because the way social media is like, oh, well, DM me for coaching, I'll send you my plan kind of thing. But not everyone can train other people. No matter how good you are at doing something, you have to have something innate in you to be able to relate to other people. Or, you know, maybe you have to be selfless. You have to really want, you know, to help other people at the same time. So that's kind of it's a pretty powerful subject. Like, was it early with you? You said you started training early. Did you know you wanted to be a coach? Did you get into coaching really early?
Well, I love that question. And it kind of it makes me think about so many different things. I remember, you guys probably don't remember a guy named Jim Seitzer. He was one of the first guys to work with Mike Francois. He was either a Mr. America or he got runner-up in the Mr. America in the 70s. He actually beat Lee Haney in the Teenage Mr. America. Jimmy is somebody I respect a lot, and he used to watch me train, and he'd ask me questions. And one day Jimmy said, I would have loved to have had somebody like you back when I was younger. I've never seen somebody that's that creative. Now, when Jimmy told me that, it was like around the year 2000. So that was about 20 years ago. But that was a very high compliment coming from someone I had that much respect for. And I've always felt like, I used to call it a trainer's eye. Like I've always felt like I had an eye to see certain things that a lot of people might not see. And listen, I was a kinesiology like junkie when I was a teenager. I mean, I could tell you every muscle in the hamstring when I was 14, 15 years old because I studied the kinesiology section in Muscle and Fitness magazine. Like I was obsessed by muscle innervation, nerve innervations, muscle insertions, origins, like that stuff. I was obsessed with it. And that stuff was so easy when I went to college. I was actually a lot sharper when I was younger. I can't remember all the stuff now, but when I was in college, like I took anatomy, physiology, kinesiology. I took all that stuff in like one semester, and they were like, dude, you're nuts. Like, I said, no, you don't understand. This stuff is easy for me. Now, if you want to go into math, you want to go into organic chemistry, I'm in trouble. I got problems, you know? And that's actually why I didn't go to medical school, because I couldn't get through my chemistry, because I couldn't sit in the lab. It drew me out of drop of sodium chloride and observe for 2 hours.
Oh my
I'm
God,
not going to sit here for 2 hours and stare at this experiment.
That's so relatable, man. I was a kinesiology major myself, and every class was great as far as the biomechanics, the actual exercise science stuff. Chemistry, though, failed every single exam. But guess what? I stayed after every single class and just kissed ass.
Yeah.
And somehow I got a B. Listen, man, I somehow got a B+ in the class. I don't know how, but yeah. So total side note. Sorry, that I just totally relate with that.
Oh no, my chemistry, like he said, John, you're getting A's on your test, but you're failing every lab because you keep leaving. Like, oh, dude, I can't sit here that long, man. But yeah, so I mean, I feel like I've had a little different something about it, and you know, I used to bring one guy to Mr. Ohio every year. I would coach one guy, and that guy would always win. And anytime, every year, I remember I would show up with my one guy. People would be like, oh, whoever that guy is, he's going to win. And I had a string, like, I don't know, 6 out of 7 years where I brought one guy, and that's who won the overall. And 2 years, I actually had my training partner compete, and my training partner actually beat me for the overall, like twice.
That's awesome.
So then I was like, okay, I'm going to do this show again. And I'm not training anybody for it this time. So then I finally won the overall. But anyway, so man, I've just always loved training. I love to help people. When I was in college, I was training people for food. Like I didn't have any money. So I would see, no, I'll train you if you can give me some gift cards for restaurants. I remember training people for clothes. I had a friend that worked for Structure, Abercrombie and Fitch. And I remember, man, if you can just give me a $50 gift card every week, I'll train you. And like, I had to barter with people because I had no money. So I had all these people I was training and I got no money, but I had all these gift cards for food and clothes. And that's kind of how I got by. And, but anyway, so yeah, I've been doing it for a long time, and you guys will get a kick out of this. So when I was still at the bank, I was still at Chase. What I did was I had people that were paying me for training, and what I did was I actually wrote out everything for them, and I emailed it to them on Sundays. So Saturday, after I trained, I would spend all day writing what I thought was perfect for that person. And then on Sunday, I would send it out, and I was working all day Saturdays, all day Sunday, and I was literally sending emails and writing every single one out individually, which took a tremendous amount of time. And I was starting to burn out. I've realized this probably isn't the best approach for longevity, but there are people out there that will tell you, oh yeah, I remember John, every Sunday, man, he would send it, actually came from his bank address. He would send me the workout, and then I got, I had so many people, I had to adapt my strategy, but I adapted by building 30 some, I'm probably up to 35 programs now. So if you've got an issue and you can get to the gym, I have a program that'll work for you. But anyway, so I've always loved it. I've always enjoyed it. And there's nothing that I enjoy more than have people come into town and train with me. And I can't quite do the stuff I used to be able to do. But I still can work pretty hard. We had Mr. LeBrod, a hunter, came around Arnold Classic weekend. He trained, and I thought, man, this kid's really good. Like, yeah, good.
I've loved watching his transformation as he's grown up, and because I've always followed his dad, and just kind of seen that progress. But that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you could see like back then he was good, and I, this is how much I love training. So you guys know I was, until the quarantine happened, I was going out to different gyms across the country. I just love to train in awesome gyms. Like, I'll just get on a plane and go fly to Omaha and go train at Bob's Fitness Complex because I think it's probably the best gym in the nation.
That's an amazing gym.
Just for the weekend. I love it. Like, I'm in heaven when I do that.
It's like for you guys, if you haven't been there, it's like literally like a part of a mall. They bought like a few of the store units and connected all of them, and it's like a mall of fitness equipment. Like, they have everything you've ever. It's in Omaha, Nebraska, which actually is like the city that most pro athletes go to in their off season because they don't get bothered there. Like, LeBron has a house there. This gym is just insane. Like, everything you ever want. Oh yeah.
Yeah, if I could, I'm looking at it right now. I'm just like, holy crap.
Take a trip. John, next time you fly in, we'll meet you there.
Well, as soon as, I can't wait. Hopefully, what I'm thinking is, I don't want to turn this into a political conversation, but I'm thinking in November, then everything will come back to normal once the election's over. So,
hopefully.
So I'm hoping, but when that happens, I can't wait to get back out on the road.
That's awesome.
I was kind of thinking, so, I mean, from a long time of coaching, and you mentioned about maybe getting burned out, that you're going to have ups and downs of when you're passionate. And I don't know if there will be like one particular thing you could talk about, but there's always kind of like that ebb and flow of your motivation, passion about this. Is there like something like a client or a story or anything like that sort of just sticks with you, when you work so closely with people and they trust you so much and you have these relationships with people? I mean, there's probably a lot of them for you, but is there anything just, you just can't, it's like that thing in the back of your head that just always sort of sticks with you when you hear someone's story or you help them through something? I don't know if you had anything like that like gave you internal motivation.
Well, one of the things that I've tried to do over the years is I've tried to mentor a lot of my training clients as well, particularly the pros that have no real business savvy. And I try to help them understand, like, there's got to be life after bodybuilding. So we need to talk about what that's going to look like for you. So I've had a number of people that I don't like talk about it publicly, but I've had a number of pros that I've worked with, and it was almost more of a mentoring thing than it was. I mean, it was training too, but because when I have somebody that I work with, I don't look at them as just a number. It's a person. And I try to do my best to do as much as I can for them. Some of the more inspiring ones, they're not pros at all. I had a lady that has, she's a war veteran. She has PTSD, and she had a hard time, right? She was having some issues. And I kept telling her, listen, I believe in you, you know, let's keep going. Let's focus on the good stuff. And like in the last 6 months, she's been phenomenal. And she was telling me how happy she was. And I said, well, I remember a year ago, remember all those conversations we had where you were really struggling? I said, I knew you had it in you. I knew you did. So she was like really emotional. Yeah. And like, thank you. I appreciate you believing in me. And I've had some other people that I've said, you know, I know things don't look real good right now, but I know you're an awesome person. I know things are going to work out. Those are the kind of things that I really remember the most. You know, I've coached people that have won contests. Right. That's great. I enjoy it. I love that too. But I mean, it's great. It's what you get paid to do. But when you can actually like change someone's life, you know, because what happens with athletes is, you know, most of the time they move on. They go to another coach, and I don't blame them. They just listen. I don't blame them. I get bored too of working with the same person, and I'd probably go to someone else too. So sometimes that happens, and I don't hold that against anybody. That's just life in the big city of being a coach. So yeah, you can help people win shows. I coached Sean Clarito when he won his first show. I coached Fuad when he won his first show. When Mark Dugdale was about to quit bodybuilding, he came back after we talked. He won at least 3 shows. I got a lot of stories like that, and that's cool. But you know, the stories where people can say, oh my God, this was the only guy that believed in me, and now look at where I'm at. That's the kind of stuff that you can really be proud of.
On a personal note, I don't know originally, but for most bodybuilders, their dream is to become a pro. And obviously it took you a little bit longer than it does most pros. Was there, I don't know if you originally were mostly focused on becoming a pro, but if you were, was there a point where it switched to becoming auxiliary, where your business was more important?
No. Deep in my heart, I wanted to be a pro ever since I was 12, 13 years old. And I wanted it more than anything. Probably an unhealthy obsession, to be honest with you. Yeah, but no, at no point did my business become more important than me hitting that goal. It was my lifelong goal. I'm not particularly proud of telling you that. I'm just being honest with you. And it was my lifelong goal. I wanted to be a pro really bad. I knew that the genetics weren't in my favor. You know, here I am, a narrow clavicle, wide hip guy, wide pelvic girdle. I don't have the structure that the other guys have, but I've got a lot of brain power working for me, and I can figure things out, and I can maximize what I do have. Yeah. And I believe that when it comes to just maxing out your potential, you can put me in the top 10 in the world for someone who's done the most with what he was given. For sure. That I am proud of. There were so many times when I just said, I just don't have the genetics, but maybe I can get a little better. So there's no reason to quit. I mean, I love training, so why would I quit? So you keep training, and it's like, wow, I got a little better. Maybe now I can try again. I think, you know, it took me 16 tries before I won my pro card at pro qualifiers. So, you know, I would be like, man, I deep in my heart, I just don't know that I have it, but I think I can get a little better. And then, of course, in 2005, when I lost my colon to the disease, okay, now not only do I have not a pretty physique, now I got like scars on my abs, and now it's going to really be hard to get a pro card. So, you know, I tried, and then in 2012, like I was telling you guys, I had that 1 year where I gained 9-10 pounds of stage weight. My body changed. It's like, okay, now maybe I don't have a pretty body, but now I've got enough muscle so that it's not that bad. Plus I have good enough condition. I have some of the best condition in the country. Now I can be formidable. Now I can really be a threat at the pro shows. And then I got second, then the third year I got second. So 2012, I got second. 2013, I got second. 2014, I got second. So 2015, I came back, and I was like, after prejudging, I was like, you know, your friends always tell you won, right? I don't care if you're the worst person at the show. Your friends will be like, you got it, baby. You got it in the bag. Like, I'm not dumb. I can see the judges, how they're looking at people. You can tell by where you're placed in the lineup. You know roughly where you're going to place. And I could tell in all 3 of those shows I was going to get second. I could tell in all 3 of them. So after the prejudging at the show in 2015, I got off stage and I said, I won. Like, I'm thinking this, I'm not telling people that, but like, of all the shows I've done, this is the first time since I was, you know, doing a state level show that I'm pretty sure I won. Like, I'm pretty sure I won. So I come back for the finals and, you know, they're counting it down, 5th place, 4th place, 3rd place. And I keep telling myself, like, I know I've won. I'm pretty sure I won. So I'm like, don't cry, because I'm hyper emotional. I'm like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And then they announced 2nd place, and the audience in New York went crazy. They went crazy. People in New York really get behind me. That's why I love my New Yorkers over there. So they announced 2nd place, and the crowd goes nuts. And then, of course, they announced me in 1st. The crowd got even louder. And I broke down. I'm crying like a little baby. And I go backstage, and the people backstage are crying, you know, because they can tell what I've been through. So many years, so many tries. I won my class in the overall in both in the 35 and the 40s. I got a perfect score. Like, nobody can take this away from me, right? And then I went right into the pro shows. You know, obviously, I have a lot of friends that are pros that I'm coaching. They're like, dude, you need to get right in there right now. I'm like, that's exactly what I plan to do. So I got right into 3 pro shows, and I placed in all 3 of them. My first three attempts the same year. Just barely missed qualifying for the Olympia by 2 points. If there had been one more show, I could have got my points and got in it. But so it was a dream come true, and I put so much work into that for so many years. And obviously I was super discouraged many times. Many times I was discouraged and questioned myself. I never questioned my work ethic. I just questioned if I had the genetics, the structure to be able to do it. So anyways, I know I'm a little long-winded. I appreciate you guys bearing with me.
That's inspiring. No, that's an amazing story.
Feels good. And there's so many other stories within there too. Like I remember, like it's just that's so cool. I remember I tell a couple of my friends about you wearing that sweatsuit on the roof of that building in Dallas, like
in San Antonio.
You were what, like 1 pound overweight, and Steve made you go sweat it out on the roof?
Well, so what happened was, I'll give you a very quick version. When I arrived in San Antonio, I was probably 219. I had to get down to 212. So I went to the roof in San Antonio in the middle of the summer, and it was bad, dude. It was so hot. And then I went down. My friend Scott Stevenson was with me. And then Scott set my bathroom up to be a little sauna. He put towels under the crack of the door in the bathroom. He turned the water up. I put on one of those suits that you wore in high school when you wrestled, right? The gray suits. And I sweat, and I just got to the very end, like I'm going to die. And I went and weighed in. And so I get on a scale. I can barely even stand up. I get on a scale, and it's like 212.4. And I look at Steve, and I don't say anything. And I'm thinking, please
cut my foot off.
like, please let me in. Steve looks at me, and he goes, nope, 0.4 over. He said, you got 15 minutes. Go to the bathroom, you'll be fine. I'm like, well, I haven't eaten in a day. I have no colon, and I just sweat out every ounce of liquid in my body. So I go into the bathroom, and I sit on the toilet for 14 minutes, and nothing happens. So with 1 minute left, I go back in, and there was another guy, I don't know who it was, I can't remember, but he said, listen, we used to do this in wrestling. Try to let all your air out as much as you can let your air out, blow all your air out. And I'm thinking, at this point, I'll try anything. I'll stand on my head if I have to. So I blow all my air out till I can't breathe, and I get on a scale, like I step on like a mouse. It hits 212.0, and when I saw that, like, I jump off, like, boom, there's my 212.0. So, but that's how hard it was for me to make weight. It was extremely difficult. When I did the Tampa Pro Show, I got 3rd place. I spent 5 to 6 hours in the sauna in Tampa.
Oh my God.
It was brutal. Scott was there with me, and Scott was funny. Scott was actually pouring water on the coals to make it steam even more. Like,
oh God.
But anyway, so yeah, obviously I love to tell stories. So.
Yeah, no.
I love it.
I don't want to get all off the track, but so one thing that we kind of notice when it comes to bodybuilding training, or whether you get parallels with business. A lot of people in the space, we talk about this a lot, is, it's never enough, right? There's always something more that you're after. every single day, right? You just win, you just finally get your pro card, and already you don't even get 5 minutes to enjoy it. You're thinking, okay, I have this show. And, we talk about this, like, when does that obsession stop? And the same thing happens with business. It's like, well, hey, we did a great month last month. Well, now we got to do better next month. Like, I was just kind of curious because you do a lot of coaching and training. And so I'm sure you see this in a lot of people too, where you get so obsessive about numbers. Like, is there things that you do or things that you implement in your coaching, just ways to sort of combat that? You can go down, anything, when you get too obsessive about things like that can all of a sudden become, damaging. And it's like that constant balance is something that we talk about all the time. Like, how do you keep that balance? I didn't know if that was something that you talk about, or things that you do in your life that kind of help you, or things that you sort of pass on to your clients.
Yeah, well, so I think about that a lot, and I think that I'm in a much better place now than I was, say, 10 years ago. I was at a point where I was just taking people who would sign up with me, and I got to 220 people, and I was working maybe 75 hours a week, probably, roughly. And we had our kids in 2008, and my kids were, like a couple years old, and it was like, this isn't how I want my life to go. I don't want to be like, I didn't have a dad. I didn't have a mom. I didn't want to be that guy. Like, my dad, like, disappeared. Like, I never even met him. I don't even know who he is.
Wow.
But it's even worse, like, for kids to have a dad and the dad to not be there. And so I thought, I can't do this. I can't let my kids go through life and not have a dad. So I started to become extremely picky with who I trained. And it became very quickly apparent to me that money was really, you need enough to be happy, but then beyond that, like, I'm not the guy that's going to post a picture standing next to a private jet going, look how cool I am, guys. Look, I like nice things just like anybody else, but I'm not going to let that outweigh the importance of my kids, my family. I'm not going to do it. So I cut down the amount of business I was doing to spend more time with my kids. I coach them in football. I'm at every practice. I'm at every game. When they're in soccer, I'm at every game. Swimming, I was at, a fair amount of the practices this year, their first year swimming. I'm very active in my kids' life. And even toward the end of when I was competing, my last show I did was 2017. So probably the last 5 years of me competing, I kept Friday nights open so my wife and I could go out, enjoy dinner. So I had a cheat meal for every Friday up until the show, all the way through my entire competitive career there in the last 5 years, I'd say at least 5 years. So I think I realized pretty quickly that there's more important things than money. And I do tend to be, when I put my mind to something, I do tend to be hyper-focused. So, like, I'll give an example. Like, I'm coaching football right now. We just had our tryouts. So what I was doing before I got on this call was the other coach came, and we sat down and we went through all 60-some players from evaluations. And like, I'm obsessive about this. I already have my plays drawn up, laminated on cards. Nobody else does that. Nobody else does that. But that's just how I am. If I'm going to do something, we'll do it right. So there's some other things going on in my life now. I can't really get into a lot of details because I don't have a lot of details. But politically, I had dinner with the Secretary of State a couple nights ago. So when I get involved with something, I put my mind to it. I do it right. So let's just say I'm meeting with a lot of people, a lot of very, very good people to know and to talk to and to get some coaching from. So you may see something coming from me in the next year that's going to surprise you even more.
Meadows 2024.
So we'll see.
That's funny because I was on a Instagram live with Chris Waldron from Inspired earlier, and someone made the comment that it would be he was getting on a political rant, and they said Meadows and Waldron for 2024 was one of the comments people said.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that food thing you talked about, how you left every Friday night open to have dinner with your family, is really powerful.
Huge.
It's really easy to get hyper-focused in your goals. And I think that is really, in like a lot of these kinds of sports, it's hard to learn that sometimes less can be more as well. People can obsess over training 3 hours in the gym, cardio every single morning for an hour. John's actually even one of the few people we could even talk about like overusage of drugs as well in the sport, because people think that that's stuff you can just lean on. Whereas a lot of the times if you pull back, you actually progress a lot better.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if it was a matter of the more you take, the better you'll get, think about all the people that would be 300-pound monsters by now, you know.
Right.
Boston Lloyd would be Mr. Olympia.
Yeah.
Boston Lloyd would be Mr. Olympia.
I mean, I've had guys that I had one guy who's a very popular pro now. I don't want to embarrass him, but when he won his pro card, I cut what he had been doing with his previous coach in half. And he was like, oh, this is amazing. I feel so much better. I don't feel sick all the time. I sleep better. His body dramatically improved. The next year he won his pro card. And he's a legit guy now. He's really good. But there's been a lot of guys like that. Well, John, I thought I had to take 2 grams of test. Who told you that? That's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You know? And unfortunately, that's what happens with a lot of the new coaches that come into the business. They didn't go through what we did in the 80s and 90s, and they didn't see that you could actually do really well with lower amounts. Like, I won my state title before I ever took testosterone. I went all the way to the pro qualifier before I ever had growth hormone. Like, now, if a guy's going to win the state title, he thinks he's got to be on 6 different things and, 10 units of growth hormone. Like, it's crazy.
It's sad because that oh, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that was it.
Oh, well, yeah, it's sad because that same mentality from coaches to bodybuilders is brought to the local gym scene where I am, at least. And we see these young guys who, they've been lifting, and instead of, trying to embark on testosterone or whatever, like a very basic, moderate thing, they'll come in the store and talk to me and, 6 or 7 different compounds, and they don't even know, like, how much of each they're doing. They're just like, oh, I'll just pull it back to this. And I'm like, who told you this? Oh, well, this big guy, I was like, is he your dealer? Yeah. I'm like, of course he is, like, it's just sad. It is sad.
I love Justin's part about talking about people claiming they're on TRT, but they're really just buying testosterone from some dude at the gym. They're taking like 500 milligrams a week, and they're like, I'm on TRT. Like, on TRT.
I'm sorry, but 300 is not TRT.
That's not TRT.
No. I'm so sick of guys telling me that, like, oh yeah, my doctor's got me on 300 a week. I'm like, no, he doesn't. No, he doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
Sorry to get on that topic, but
well, the YouTube is pretty cool. There's a designation called a YouTube natty. So if you're
wait, John, did you just say the YouTube, like the?
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to clarify that really quick.
Yeah. So if you're under 700 milligrams on YouTube, you're considered natty.
It's all relative, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. Hey.
I had somebody tell me once, they were like, I'm just gonna get on a little test. I was like, what the hell does that mean? I don't understand.
I had a guy.
There was, and one thing you were talking about, John, too, about the when I was younger, I started following bodybuilding. Like when I was really young, probably like what you said, I was 12, 13, started going to the gym with my dad. Really got into like following along with bodybuilding, and then sort of got away from it. And I remember like coming back to it and seeing it, and I was like, man, these guys look like crap compared to the guys that I grew up sort of looking at. I was like, they're like bigger, but I was like, this doesn't look right to me at all. Just seeing like the training. But I think there was like where we're just like, more, and all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, okay, maybe we should pull back just a little bit. We sort of saw this pendulum swing maybe a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, you can't really blame the athletes. They just go by what the judges are rewarding. The guys now are bigger, which I think is just from GH and insulin, and they're really lean. They're really lean, but the problem is it's the lack of separation and detail. If you look at the guys in the 80s and 90s, they had very crisp muscle separation, and they had many more striations in their muscle groups, like their vastus lateralis or the long head of their tricep. Most of the guys had really good deep striations there. And now you see guys that Lee Haney was a monster, and he was like, 245, 250? Now, like, everybody weighs that. Like, there's, but it doesn't look the same. It doesn't have the same quality. So, a lot of people go, well, the guys don't get in shape now. I don't think that's correct. I think you turn around, they have striated glutes, but that's like the only area of their body that's striated. which I always thought was odd, but that's when you put so much, I don't know, it's like you stuff a muscle so much, you make it get so big, it just starts to lose those fine details.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think that's more what it is. I don't think guys are out of shape. I mean, if you actually go to the problem too, a lot of the pictures are terrible. They used to have a show in California called the California Pro, and the pictures were phenomenal. You could really see people's lines. But the lighting is so bad now. And then all the pictures are on the internet. People are like, look how fat these guys are. Look how out of shape they are. Well, if you're actually at the shows and you see them, they're lean. Like, they're really lean. If you go to Mr. Olympia, like, oh, that guy was completely out of shape. No, he was not out of shape. He might have been a little bit off, but he was not fat. Stop saying these guys are fat. They're not fat.
People say a lot of crazy stuff.
They just don't have the lines. And I'm a line guy, even though I don't, I was kind of looked at more as a mass guy because of how much I weighed. I still like the lines. Like when you think about like a Leela Brada or a Sean Ray, those guys had really crisp lines. There was a guy named Charles Claremont. They had really nice lines. So anyways, I don't want to go off on a tangent there, but it's just a different look, and it's just based on what the judges reward.
So one segue I wanted to make, which is really good here, because you talked a little bit about the amounts of drugs that people take, but specifically growth in insulin, is the segue that came into with supplements. We started seeing a lot of like Celtec and a lot of sugar in it. We see people talking about post-workout dextrose and stuff like that. And my theory has always been that was taken from guys in the early 2000s taking a ton of insulin or growth hormone, and all of a sudden they're taking sugar post-workout. They're having gummy bears, or Jay Cutler's was candy corn, candy corn. You think there's can you give me a little bit of a yes on that? Like, is that where all this stuff came from? Was it like this weird misconception that you have to do the things that people taking insulin were?
Well, if you look at the doses of insulin, people are taking, like, say 20 units, and that's going to require, if somebody's kind of insulin sensitive, then they're going to have at least 200 grams of carbs. Mm. So are you going to eat 6 baked potatoes? You're going to have to take sugar, right?
Yeah.
So I was never a fan of the really high doses of insulin. I thought the way Milos presented it made the most sense. He was talking about pre-workout, fast acting, get it in and get it out. I was never a fan of having your insulin levels raised all day anyway, because having high insulin levels all day long is a recipe for a degenerative disease when you get older.
Yeah.
If you go test your fasting insulin and it's really high, like, that's a bad thing. If it's like that all day, that's a bad thing. I would rather, like, if you're going to use that approach, I have no problem with it, but channel it towards your workout, shove the nutrients in then. You can get 5-8 IUs of something like Humalog and 50, 60 grams of carbs, and you can make amazing progress. You don't need 20 units and 200 grams of sugar. Like, that's just those guys, like, what's funny? When you shake your hand, their hands are like squishy.
Yes.
It has like this. It's hard to describe, but when you meet these guys, you shake your hands, it's almost like it's squishy.
It's kind of like shaking the hand of someone with diabetes.
Oh,
right?
God.
Like with like really bad. Right? I mean,
yeah.
There's some sort of connection there, right?
I think so. But I think there's a lot of truth to that too. Like, if you're going to cover that much insulin, then you're going to have to pound down a lot of sugar.
Yeah. So. Well, my problem with it has become that, like, there's normal gym goers that, like, post-workout, I have to have a bag of gummy bears. I have to spike my insulin so I'm anabolic. And I'm like, I don't think it's that effective when it's endogenously produced.
No, that's kind of silly.
Yeah. Interesting. What do you got, Jacob?
I was going to ask, we were talking about, go ahead, Jacob.
Oh, no, I wasn't going to say anything. I was going
to
say something about somebody in the industry, but that's not relevant to this cast. So anyway,
let's go.
I was going to ask, so what's the age group that you said with your coaching football? What ages is this?
10 to 12, 5th and 6th graders.
So that's got to be a lot of fun.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm a psycho dad with sports, and now I've transferred into the psycho coach. But I believe in, like, okay, I don't want this to go into a political conversation, but if you look at like groups, if you look at groups like Antifa, for example, that are out trashing Portland right now, it's a bunch of little low testosterone punks that never did anything their whole life, right? They're just little punks.
Yeah.
And I think that if some of those kids would have been in sports and had good role models, Now that conversation can lead to college too. Colleges tend to enforce some of these theories as well. But anyways, so I think with kids, like number one, man, I just love kids. I love impacting their lives. But number two, you can like sports teach them a lot of lessons. And like you guys know, it teaches hard work, it teaches teamwork, blah, blah, blah. But the biggest advantage to sports is it teaches you how to lose.
Yeah.
Now, you look at all the guys like these Antifa guys, they're a bunch of losers, right? They don't know how to handle loss. You know, people who understand how to lose can be successful in life, because all these people that are blaming right now, the cool thing to do is to blame everybody for all your problems. I'm going to blame these people and these people. I'm just going to blame everybody. How many people do you see take accountability for the mistakes they make? Or, you know what, we have some problems right now. I'm going to be part of the solution. Like, how many people really have that attitude? It's so easy to sit and point fingers, but not many people are willing to accept responsibility to make themselves better. Now, I'm not saying the world's a perfect place. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that when you work with kids, you can teach them, they can learn how to lose. They can become good kids, man. They can just become good kids, right? And then it's fun. Well, like, it's really fun. I enjoy it. I came home yesterday and I actually had my blood pressure was a little high because I was so wound up. I was completely wound up. So, and I think kids too, like I love to, what's awesome seeing a kid, and especially with your own kid, is seeing them get better at something and seeing their pride. Like, oh, wow, Dad, I did that. That's right, you did that. Like seeing kids grow, seeing them succeed, seeing the pride they take, like seeing their confidence build. It's really rewarding as a coach. It's incredibly rewarding as a coach.
One of the things Jim Wendler said, I'm sorry, real quick.
I was going to say like 10 to 12 is such a pivotal age too. Yeah. And one thing that was always cool about football or, you know, soccer and a lot of sports that kids get into is you have a job you have to do. Like you have to go out there and you have to do that job or everything sort of falls apart. So you have a role to play. And if you don't hold up your end of the bargain, everybody sort of suffers from it. And that's what you talk about, lessons that we can lead or that you can sort of apply as you go through life is, you know, do your job, you know, focus on and have accountability for what you're supposed to do to your responsibility, because other people are counting on you too. And that's going to go with you all throughout your life. And learning that at that age is huge for kids. And if you don't, I mean, exactly like what you were touching on, you can tell people that get to a certain point in their life and have never had to do that. You know, no one's ever challenged them to be accountable and hold up your end of the bargain. So that's one thing that was always great about sports, man. I mean, you could always, whether it was an individual sport like wrestling, you're still on a team, you know, whether it's football where you have a specific job or soccer or something like that. So, yeah, I think that's great. It's a great age, too. 10 to 12 is.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah.
One of the things that Jim Wendler said was talking about wrestling. I don't know if your kids wrestled, John, but
they did not. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the job thing is really cool, what Justin said. But the thing about wrestling is like it's one-on-one, and if you lose, you got to stand up and shake that guy's hand. And that's really big on what you said about losing. Like you got to stand up, shake his hand, be like, you know what, you're the better man today, but I'm going to beat your ass tomorrow. Yeah. You know, and that's really huge for kids. I don't think that a lot of kids get that these days. You know, you still get trophies.
Jimmy, by the way, he's an awesome football coach too. Wendler is.
Cool. Oh yeah, that guy's a badass. I get a lot of my information from Elite FTS and across the board. I mean, they only have good people over there, which I know you're involved with.
Yep.
So, one question that I wanted to ask was, you talked about cherry pies for a while when you were younger and bulking with cherry pies. I've never heard the whole story, but was there some sort of like progressive overload with cherry pie eating?
Overload the colon.
What colon?
Yeah, I don't have one now. When I weighed in, like say I weigh in 221, right? I always say, now, if I had a colon, I'd be 225. Right? I had a hard time gaining weight when I was a teenager, like many teenagers. And my grandmother who raised me was a cook in a restaurant. Like she was the proverbial, like she would like everybody. It's a little town, this little town restaurant, and everybody would come there. Everybody wanted her food. She was in the back in the 90 to 100-degree heat back there in the kitchen. And she took so much pride in that. She made the best food. But anyways, long story short, they would always have food that people didn't eat and pies. So she knew I was trying to gain weight. So she would always, she had permission from the owner to bring home pie, like whatever people didn't eat. So usually there was a cherry pie that didn't get eaten like every day. So it was either that or the blackberry pie. So she would bring home a cherry pie, and that's what I ate to gain weight. Like, I could eat as much of the cherry pie. I mean, like if I ate the whole thing, that's a lot of calories. So that's the story. Like I just was having a hard time gaining weight. So she'd bring me home food, and 4 out of every 5 times it was a whole cherry pie. So
I can
I
get
love
behind
it.
that.
Any port in the storm.
Uh-huh.
I'm out of questions. So Justin and Jacob, if you got stuff,
Yeah.
please.
I definitely do. Jacob, I do, but
Oh.
go ahead, man. I've been asking a lot of questions.
I mean, man, as far as questions go, no, I'm just kind of listening and putting in my 2 cents, depending on what topic we're talking about. I mean, you know,
Yeah, I was gonna say. So, one thing I was gonna ask. You said you didn't grow up with a father, and I know for me, like that's how I got into training and health and everything. My parents were always at the gym and kind of got me started down that path. So, going back, like, was it sports? Was it, or like what sort of got you? What sort of triggered that at such a young age? If it wasn't, parents obviously, or was it friends?
yeah, so I think I'm a little different. I'm a little odd because I had this really bizarre work ethic at like 11, 12 years old. Like I wanted to run. I wanted to do push-ups. Like nobody, my grandmother didn't know that stuff. She was an overweight woman. She was a cook in a restaurant. She didn't understand any of that stuff. But there was something about it that I just really was obsessed with it. And when I first started, probably 11 years old, I would do as many push-ups as I could. And then I would do as many sit-ups as I could before I went to bed every night. Nobody told me to do that. I just did it. And when I got into like school, junior high and high school, I didn't think study hall was a good use of my time. So I had hall passes. I had passes from the gym teacher. I could go run around the gymnasium, literally in circles the whole time, or I could go to the little teeny weight room in our high school. And that's what I did.
Instead of chemistry lab, this is what you were doing too,
right? Right. Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. I didn't connect those dots. So nobody asked me to do that. And like when I was in junior high, I could do the most push-ups, the most rope jumps in a minute, the most sit-ups, all that stuff. When I went to high school, I remember on the football team, I remember my junior year, we would run a mile, then we would go squat. I remember beating the whole team when I ran the mile. And then I remember we went to the squat room, the squats, and I squatted more than anybody on the whole team. I was a very strong squatter. And in fact, it created some tension because the head coach thought I was on drugs. And he was like, there's no kid that can do this. I know you're on drugs. At the time, I was extremely anti-drug, as anti as you get. I was one of those guys that I read Death in the Locker Room by Bob Goldman, and I thought if I took a tablet of Benadryl, I'd fall over and die. So it was not true. But my point is I never had anybody tell me you have to work this hard. I actually loved it and I enjoyed it. And then when I got into my 20s, more deeply into bodybuilding, I literally took a sense of pride walking out of the gym. And I thought to myself, there's nobody that can do this. I mean, there obviously were. But I thought to myself, man, there is not many people in this world that's going to put themselves through what I just put myself through. Like, I don't think many people have the guts to be able to do what I just did. I mean, I would do 10 reps with 500 on the squat, and with the squat rack was right beside the leg press. And then I'd get on the leg press with 900 pounds, and I'd do a set of 30 or 40 with it. Like, that was a superset. And I just remember thinking, there's not many people that's going to have the guts to do that. And nobody told me to do it. It's like when people come here to train with me, I get really uncomfortable when I can't do all the stuff I want to do because I want to lead by example. I want to show them, like, I'm willing to do this with you. And so I've had this weird work ethic that carried over without a dad. It just was there. And I get, honestly, man, I get frustrated sometimes with my kids because I'm like, I think that's part of my genes that you didn't get, right? Like,
Yeah.
So,
I think in a different way. I think it's been really cool for you to showcase your son's yo-yo tricks. I'm not joking about this at all. Like the amount of work that he clearly puts into that is definitely the same work ethic that you probably put into weight training.
He does it for hours a day.
Well, you ran and squatted for hours a day, you know?
Yeah. Right? Well, he's getting so good now. He's amazing.
That's awesome.
Like we had a YouTube live video today, and you know, he finished off the YouTube video where he jumped in and did some yo-yo tricks, and people are blown away. They're like, "This is unreal! Like, this is amazing."
Yeah, if we did this any earlier, I was going to ask if you could start the video with one, because I love when you start the videos with them. It's so wholesome, and you don't get that in fitness or bodybuilding. Like when you showcase your family and all that stuff, it's just so wholesome and good, you know. And no one else is proud of their family in this sport. It's kind of scary. I mean, it's so different from like where we came from.
It is scary. And one of the parts about bodybuilding, when I travel and do my seminars, I have a section where I talk about, listen, it's a selfish sport, but do not shut your family out. That's a really bad idea. Like, you need to figure out a way, and I can talk about certain ways to do that, but you need to figure out a way to keep their family engaged. You need to be tight with them. You need to spend time with them. You can't go, oh, I'm dieting for the, you know, whatever. I'm dieting for the New York Pro, so you guys are going to have to take a break from me for 12 weeks. I'll talk to you when the show's over. Bad idea.
Yeah.
You're going to regret it.
Well,
right?
One of the things that stuck out to me was when Justin asked, how did you get into this? One of the things that I thought of was during that time when you got into training, earlier in bodybuilding, masculinity was celebrated. Muscles were exciting. You know, it was like Arnold was mainstream. You don't see Brandon Curry or Phil Heath being in movies or being mainstream popular. It's a very niche sport. Back in the day, I mean, Jacob's wearing a shirt that is a parody of a shirt that Arnold had. You know, it was popular back in the day, and being part of a family was like that was celebrated, and that's not the same way anymore. I think, not to go political, just like you said, but I think that ends up with a lot of these things like Antifa and stuff when people aren't proud of masculinity or family or any of that stuff. So it's really cool to see that you put that in seminars.
Yeah, in fact, you know, a lot of people tell me like that was my favorite part because that's life impacting. Like a lot of people go, well, man, I've made some serious mistakes and paid for it. I wish I'd have known this beforehand. But yeah, man, I love talking about stuff like that. I can do a whole podcast about just things like that because I think people need to hear it.
Yeah. I actually think that's something that the three of us have bonded over is like work ethic and time and balance. So.
Yeah, I mean, really, like with us, and it kind of ties into it. I mean, we don't talk about, I don't know, supplements or training ever, really. I mean, because I think like what you're talking about with your coaching, your training is, you know, maybe it's 2 hours out of the day, an hour and a half total or whatever for 4 or 5 days a week or whatever it is. All the rest of those hours, you know, in your day is, you know, what it feels to me like that's a lot of your focus is like, okay, yes, we can do these things, but what we've always said, I've said it over and over again, the lessons that you learn in the gym, it's kind of like what you alluded to about sports. You learn so much about accountability and discipline, sticking to a schedule, things that sort of travel with you through life. I tell people this all the time. They're like, well, you know, I don't want to go to the gym and, you know, get big. I don't want to look like this. Like, that has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with anything. It's about going there and being accountable to yourself every single day. And that's something that carries through to the other, you know, 22 hours a day, which just sounds like that's become, or that's a real big focus of your passion too, is let's focus on the rest of your days, you know, not just the time we're training in the gym.
Well, I had, you guys will probably laugh at me, but many years ago, I had an epiphany, and I realized that I didn't need to be the guy who knew the most about everything bodybuilding related. Like, I literally one day said, you know, you don't need to post about actin and myosin filaments sliding together, and like, you don't have to be the expert on everything, right? And it was like, it was so relieving. So when I post now, of course I get into some subjects deeply, and trust me, I can get into stuff real deep if you want to, but I would rather post just things that make people's lives better. You know, I'm not saying I'm anti-education. I just see a lot of posts, and I can kind of feel their posts as them trying to show how smart they are.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I don't do that. Like, a lot of my messages and a lot of my YouTube videos, for example, are very basic. Like, if you flip over into my Facebook right now and you look at the last couple posts I've made, it's about being a good person. It has nothing to do with lifting weights, nothing to do with what you eat. Again, I love that stuff. I love talking about it, but I seem to care more about messages about just being a good person, treating people right. That stuff just means a little bit more to me in my life now. I don't, like, if someone says, John, you don't know anything about weightlifting, I'm cool with that. That's fine. You can think that if you want. I don't need to go prove to people like, oh, look how much look all these big words I know. Like, I don't care. I just don't care.
I think
Anyway.
that's like I think it's a big thing why like video content is so popular. Two people can have the same exact message, but the way it's delivered from someone, you can just tell, like, when, as people listen, you can feel it, you can hear it, you can see it in their face, you can hear it in their voice, that they really mean that. And that's what I think connects with people. Almost the message sometimes becomes secondary. I think a lot of people, I get this a lot. I know Ben and Jacob kind of hear this too, is like sometimes people don't listen to like the details of what we say. They just listen to us talk because they like to hear us talk. And because they'll ask me a question, I was like, well, didn't you listen to what I said? And they're like, well, no, I was just listening, just because it's inspiring and stuff like that. And kind of plays into what you're saying, where sometimes like all that stuff, yeah, maybe we can do that next week or down the path farther with you. You want to take it further, but a lot of people just really just want to, have that connection with someone that really does care. And that's the message that sort of like comes across why I think, I'm telling you, like, when we announced like this podcast, it was crazy to me, like how many people, when we announced that we were going to do this episode with you, I got way more messages than with anybody else. They were so freaking excited. Like, it was amazing. Like, just everyone was like, oh my God, I can't wait for this. It was really cool.
Same here.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
Yeah, John, I think you're just relatable to normal people, like, because you don't post with private jets and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, like, people get it. They're like, I'm more like John. I'm not a pro bodybuilder, but I'm more like him. Yeah. If anything, you actually speak out against the people that post private jets and you tear down their lack of manufacturing.
I'm not afraid. Listen, I'm not afraid of anyone, man. I think you guys know me well enough to know that I'm not a troublemaker and I'm a positive guy. But I also will take a very hard stand if I think it's warranted.
Yeah.
Right.
And I've had people threaten me. I've had people try to pay me off to not say things. I won't do it. You can't bully me.
Right.
Well,
and
can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's kind of interesting. Everyone else is running sales, and you're talking about bad stuff that happens in the industry, like almost maybe shooting yourself in the foot, some would say.
Yeah.
That video that you did about a certain manufacturer, NutriCap, and what happened in the past, I think it was really kind of pivotal for the year. A lot of people shared it. A lot of people talked about it. I mean, I talk about bad manufacturers all the time, but I don't have the viewer base that you do. So it got shared pretty incredibly well. I don't know if you want to move into that a little bit. I think it's a pretty big topic.
Well, I mean, what frustrates me is that we allow these things to happen. And listen, we all make mistakes. And anybody who knows manufacturing knows that you get warning letters. Like, things happen. Doesn't mean you're a bad guy. I'm sure if you did the research, NutriBio probably has had warnings, but I love Mark Glazier and I stand behind that guy and that company 1,000%. But you have people that are criminals. And what frustrates me is they can do what they do criminally, close up shop, set up shop again as another company, and then supplement brands go to them knowing what their past is and do business with them because they can make a little more money. And, when you looked at the CFR, when you look at everything I broke down, it was major stuff. It wasn't, well, you missed cleaning this piece of equipment. It was like literally your batch records don't match the ingredient label. Like, what is supposed to be in a product, you literally have your record, your recipe of what's going to be made is not the same. That's not a small mistake, particularly someone who's been in the industry a long time as those cats over there have been. That's inexcusable. That's blatant. And then, you know, then you have an ingredient that's magically showing up that has been essentially outlawed. I don't want to say outlawed, but they've been told this ingredient should not end up in your supplements. And all of a sudden it's ending up in supplements again after months and months and months. And this isn't old stuff. This is a new run. So explain to me how that happened, right? So I'm not going to sit by and you know, I didn't say anything about the supplement companies itself. You know, that's not my problem. I'm not out. It's not my, as a brand owner, I don't think it's right for me to go bash other brands. I don't think that's cool. But I do think it's right to point out manufacturing practices that are bad and the fact that we let them hang around. Anyway, so.
Yeah, because there's manufacturers, and Ben, you and I talk about this all the time. There's manufacturers that I see because a lot of them just go from, okay, I worked at this manufacturer, I learned these ways to do it, and then I just go open my own. So I continue these the ways that you're not necessarily supposed to do them. But then everybody makes mistakes, like you said too. So it's not always that you're out to try to do something wrong. Maybe you just have to have a conversation about, hey, let's figure out a better way. But when it's a consistent, constant, just skirting of the rules and basically thumbing your nose up at it to try to do things, it's like at some point there has to be, some sort of pushback against this. And it's hard in your position too, because it's like, where's the balance of, I'm trying to point out a problem, but I'm not doing it for like my benefit. Everybody seems to do things these days. How can I best improve my position? I don't really care about the overall problem. I just want to make myself look good. So it's like, I think when you did that, people were like, wow, okay. Because people respect like what you have to say, and they know that you're not coming at it from a self-promotional, like, look at me, I'm standing on a soapbox kind of thing. I think people really like open their eyes to that situation because you were the one that said it, and they're like, oh wow, I didn't, I've heard people rumble about this, but it never really gets out there. It gets swept under the rug, and it just, we're on to the next sort of topic. So I think that was, like Ben said, it was kind of, opened a lot of people's eyes.
Well, and if you look at the video, if you watch it, all I did was present facts. All I did was say, here's this. I didn't say, you guys are terrible, I don't like you. I just said, here's the facts. Here's this violation, here's what it means. Here's this violation, here's what it means. All I did was present facts. So
I think it's kind of weird because people are used to me talking about FDA regulations. I think a lot of people's ears like kind of shut when they hear me start talking about CFR and stuff. But when you hear someone who is already talking about training and diet and stuff, which people are like really interested. Now they start talking about it. Like when I shared your video, John, I was like, I don't ever share other people's views on the FDA because no one ever really gets it. Like people are like, oh, my product's FDA approved. Like people don't know shit about the FDA. And I can never share stuff. But when you shared that, I was like, this is very well put together. And this is kind of relevant because Jacob just launched his own pre-workout line, and he's had some hurdles to get through with labeling and compliance and dealing with a manufacturer he's never dealt with before. And it's been a learning process for him, which has been kind of cool to watch as a friend. Like, I'm sad when things happen, but like it's good to see him growing. And Justin works with a lot of small startup companies that are dealing with manufacturers for the first time. Something that you and I talked about last year at the Olympia was you actually utilized two manufacturers, or at least two, and you juggle between them. If you were meeting yourself, or if you were going to talk to someone starting their own business, what were the three tips you would give them in regards to like dealing with manufacturers for the first time when you don't know anything about CFR, you don't know anything about BPRs or anything like that? What would you give them as their first course on what to expect and what to do?
Well, you can always visit the facility, and if they tell you no, then that's a red light, right? That's a red, that's a problem. Now, you can see videos of these, they make it look great, so they can scam you there. But I would say number one is try to do your homework on the manufacturers and try to see if they have any history, like how somebody could do business with NutriCap now, especially now, would blow my mind. Like, how can you, and listen, after I put that video out, I had probably 15, 20 people go, oh my God, I was going to do business with them. Like, oh, I had no idea this stuff was happening. So, like I'll give you one example. One company I do business with is Primark out in California. I'm sure you guys know Dante and Doug.
Dante, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a stellar reputation right there, right? The testing those guys do, they've always been above board. Like, I chose to do business with somebody who has a stellar reputation. All right. So that was one thing. It was just doing your homework and knowing who you're doing business with. The other thing is you do got to realize, man, it's going to be tough. Like, I'm not going to jump. Like, I'm not going to be the guy that jumps on the new people that have problems, because it is tough. Like, you can mess labels up. I've done that. But so a couple things you can do. You can ask for the batch records. I want to see exactly what you're telling your people how to build my product. If they go, well, I don't really want to share that with you, it's our proprietary flavoring. Like, if they start giving you that song and dance, okay, I'm going to get a little bit nervous, because you want to see that's the recipe. That's exactly what they're going to put in the product.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that was shocking to me. We've had those conversations with manufacturers lately. Ben and I have talked about this. We've had small brands like, okay, we want to see the batch records for this, and they're like, well, we don't really do that. It's like, you don't have a choice. That's not an option. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. We've had really heated conversations, and they're like, well, I make this joke. I'm like, if I hear this is how we've always done things, like, one more time, I'll just rage on manufacturers, because it's like, I'm like, I don't care. It's not an option for you to provide batch records if your client asks for them. Like, you have to. So it's not an option. So what are you talking about? I don't understand.
Yeah. I think that's big. I think that's big. I think that tells you a lot right there. Well, we're scared you're going to take the flavoring part of it and go somewhere else. So that kind of leads me to the second point. When you have two manufacturers, they can't kind of bend you over, right? Like,
exactly.
Okay, if you're not going to be fair, like, I've had manufacturers in the past say, got it, we'll have your order ready in 8 weeks. And then it's 8 weeks. Oh, sorry, guys, it's going to be another week. Then it's another week. And then it's 14 weeks. I've been out of product now for 4 weeks. I still have expenses, but I have no revenue. Guess what that does to a business? It's not good. Whereas if you have multiple partners, you can say, all right, look, if you're going to mess around, I'm just going to take my business over here.
Right.
So it's a good way to keep them honest. And I would advise everybody to have two manufacturers.
Yep.
So it's actually kind of funny, because I was sitting with Mark Laser a couple weeks ago, and he asked me, he's like, Ben, if you don't own your own manufacturing facility, because he does, and he wouldn't have ever thought of this before, he's like, what happens when you go to someone else? Do you take your flavoring with it? Like, do they own the flavoring, or do you own the flavoring? And I was like, well, good companies own the flavoring. Not everyone thinks that far ahead. So you specifically might manufacture, say, your pre-workout in the same flavor at 2 different facilities and get the same flavor?
Yeah, I mean, we're always going to try to match it the best we can.
Obviously, yeah.
But when you have batch records, you have a head start, because now you can say, here's exactly what to do. Yeah.
Cool. That's important. I think
that was one thing. That was one thing I wish I would have known going into it, is to at least just consult with multiple manufacturers instead of taking all my friends' words for, one manufacturer. Not so much with the process of manufacturing, but the entire process that goes into flavoring and quoting a product, and actually understanding, the batch quantities and the actual ingredients. Because if you just put all your eggs in one basket, you have no other knowledge of everything outside of that basket. And so, our first run of ETR was totally messed up, and they ran it, like the label was beyond all repair, looking back on it now. But, now go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I see it. I think we see it a lot where, because you're excited, man, right? You're excited. You've got this product that you put a lot of time, probably an effort in, and making a formula, and you're ready to get this pre-workout, and people are hyped up about it, and you're looking at the label, and maybe I think a lot of people expect some help from the manufacturers, and a lot of them don't give a shit. Like, they'll just run it, and then you find out later on all the stuff that, kind of, it's like, oh man, because you just see it all the time. People just get so excited, and I get it. It's like, it's such a fun thing, but the product itself is such a small part of it. And then, like what John was talking about earlier, then you have to get out there and sell it to people when they already have 1,000 options already. And then, another thing that you mentioned, John, that sort of plays into it with the NutriCap thing is, not that they're cheap. I don't think they're really all that cheap from what I've seen, but you're starting with a small budget. When you're a small brand, you can get a brand going for, I mean, not many industries can you get a brand up and going, you know, for as cheap as you can in this industry and as easy as you can. And so you don't have a lot of money to go and shop around and test and ask for certain things. So you're just ready to crank out the product. And that's where we see this just, it's great to be in America and have such an easy way to start a business and have a product. But when it comes to people's health, because these are going in people's bodies, I think it does change things a little bit. It's like, you just see all this domino effect of you know, poor processes throughout the entire way because it's such an easy barrier of entry. You know what I mean? When you have people just fighting and clawing over these, you know, all these new people coming in, the money, it's just, you start to just see just a total shit show of
well, and I mean, and you know, a lot of people always say the answer is third-party testing, which is fantastic. The problem is it's really expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just to test one ingredient is expensive. I know that because when I was with the old company, Prime, I paid for the testing out of my own pocket. And I can tell you it was not cheap. One test I did was $500 or $600, and one test I did was for $700. And all I tested for was Teacrine, Hydromax, and maybe one other thing. And it was expensive. You know, and that was just 2 tests. Imagine doing multiple, like, so it's easy for us, like, I can't tell a new company, okay, you got a third-party test every single ingredient and every single product you do. They're not gonna have any money. It's expensive. So that's a challenge too. It's an easy answer. And if you can do it, it's fantastic. But it's hard for companies, particularly startups that don't have a lot of money, because it can, you know, it's going to add $2 or $3 a unit to your cost. Yeah,
especially when the consumers are not asking for this stuff. Well, most consumers don't care. So why would the companies do it? You know, a lot of consumers don't bother reading the label anyway, so they don't care what the ingredients. So if no one's asking for it, what is the incentive for companies to spend all this extra money to make sure that their products are in there? It's our topic of conversation.
And even then, and here's the other thing, you know, a company can do a test and show results, and it's fantastic, right? And then they post it. Oh, look how great our product is. But you know what? Maybe they just do that, and then the next run, okay, well, everybody thinks we're great, so I'll do whatever. That's what happened with the old anabolic situation. You know, they test all this stuff. Oh, look how much test is in this, and then everybody would pass the test around. Then all of a sudden, the product would turn into crap. That's what used to happen in that kind of black market. So again, I go back to, you really have to know, like, trust. You really got to do some homework and really kind of got to just really trust. Like I do with Dante, for example. I really trust what he's doing. He does do a lot of testing, but at the end of the day, it's more of a doing my due diligence and trusting him. Like that's going to be the most important thing.
No doubt.
There's an old Russian saying, trust but verify.
Yeah.
So I think it makes a lot of sense. And you know what? I mean, I'll say it. We had mistakes happen at NutriBio, and NutriBio is like looked at as that golden child in the industry. Everyone makes mistakes. And like it happens, you know. The wrong scooper goes in bottles, all sorts of weird stuff happens, and at the end of the day, it's human error. So there are some people, obviously, that are, you know, obviously trying to defraud the public and all that stuff. But for the most part, I think the reason that people need to test is for human error. And Justin said it best when people say, I can't afford to test. He says, well, I don't think you can afford to have a company, because it's going to be way more expensive to have the lawsuit that comes if you don't.
That's a good point.
That's true. Very true.
Well, we're running up on 2 hours here, and I think
Holy crap, are we really?
Yeah. Time flies when we do these.
No wonder I'm so freaking hungry.
That's usually our timer, is when Jacob says, I have to go eat now. Like that's our,
I know. Hey man, my chicken and rice is calling me, dude. You know, it's like that or the toilet. I usually have to piss halfway through this show, so that's either my calling there. So
well, I'll clear it out. This kind of the question I brought up at the beginning that you answered last year in August. So this is going to be a year later. What have you learned in the last year in all of this business and everything? Like, what's the big thing you took away from your last 12 months of this business?
Family is still way, way more important than any amount of money. I continue to learn that and try to live it. In terms of business, oh boy, I think it's still putting the right people in the company and making the right decisions. I tend to go with my gut a lot on things. If I feel something's right, I go with it. Like the salted caramel protein, for example. My business partners were like, John, when you do when you do surveys and you figure out what flavors people buy, it's always going to be like chocolate and vanilla. Like, I don't disagree with that. But I tried that salted caramel and I knew it was phenomenal. And I knew if people would just try it. So I said, listen, guys, trust me on this. Just trust me on this. When people try this, they're going to love it. It's amazing. And sure enough, boom, it was the first one that sold out. So in my businesses, I named my businesses are obviously named Mountain Dog. People are like, oh, that's dumb. People aren't going to be able to find you on search engines. They're just going to literally come up with pictures of mountain dogs. I said, you know what? I'm going to trust my instinct on this. I like this name. People say Granite. Oh, that's a dumb name. People are going to search for that, and they're going to see Granite countertops. People are going to look for supplements, and all they're going to see is countertops. They're going to give up. You're never going to make it. Mm-hmm. I like the name. I like what it represents. So I still believe in trusting your gut, following your instincts to a degree. And as far as business goes, and you can, again, man, you can never overestimate the importance of just treating people right. Whether it's coaching or training or supplements, man, if you just treat people right, I think good things will happen down the road. Maybe it won't be as quick as people want it to be, but it'll lead to good things down the road if you just continue to do that.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
I think that's a good way to. That's a good message. I think we talk about this digital age that we live in, but it's always still people, that comes back to how you treat other people. So,
no doubt.
Cool. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us. This has been really good. I'm going to set this up as a premiere on YouTube so everyone can watch it together and chat. So I don't want to ask you to do anything with your following, John, but if you could link them to this, I think it was a really good talk. I think they'll probably appreciate your side of everything. I think we got into stuff that you don't usually talk about. So this will probably go live in the next couple of days. And I've really enjoyed the talk. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys letting me just blabber on and on.
No, I've enjoyed it.